complex pronouncement from the International Court of Justice. Only just beginning to digest it, so let's hear more now on exactly what was said and the measures that were outlined.
The court indicates the following provisional measures. 1. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall ensure, with immediate effect, that its military does not commit any acts described in point 1 above. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judges Ad hoc Barak, Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde. By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to ensure the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judges Ad hoc Barak, Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide against members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of the order. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak.
That was the presiding Judge Joan Donahue of the International Court of Justice. It's laying out those provisional measures that she issued today. Let's take this on with Thomas McManus, who's Director of the International State Crime Initiative at Queen Mary University of London, joins us live from there. So, Thomas, lay out for us, if you would, to simplify it a bit, if you could. So the court has basically found that there is a case for Israel to answer against genocide. And in the meantime, these interim measures have been issued.
Yeah, that's right. There's two kind of big things to take away. The first thing is the court has said, based on the case presented to it by South Africa, that there is now a plausible case of genocide in Gaza. So we now have a serious risk of genocide. And the genocide treaty is a special treaty, not like war crimes or crimes against humanity, where once any state hears of a serious risk, then they have to do everything they can to stop enabling that genocide and to start taking all action in their capacity to prevent it. And that applies to all states in the world. So there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on Israel and its supporting states following that part of the case. The other part we have is the provisional measures, which set out the actions that Israel have to take now. The first thing they have to do is stop the killing, if that killing is intended to destroy the Palestinians. They have to instruct their army to do the same. But further than that, further than provisional measures we saw in the Burma-Myanmar Rohingya case, they have said that the state of Israel must facilitate all necessary humanitarian aid and restore basic services. So that is rebuild the health service that has been destroyed inside Gaza. And I think that's a very strong statement as well. And they've asked Israel to report back to them in 1 month to let everyone know what progress they've made and what they're doing in order to enact these measures. So I think it's a really strong judgment from the court.
Right, Thomas, what did you make of what I don't know if you heard the South African minister, the lady Pandor of International Relations, saying about the lack of a ceasefire? She said that actually, in effecting the first, or exercising the first part of the order, that Israel must take all measures to stop killing members of the group, i.e. Palestinians, there would have to be a ceasefire.
Well, as we discussed just before the provisional measures were indicated, I didn't think that they would ask for a ceasefire, because in a way that would render Israel defenseless against attack. And that is not really within the purview of the court in this case. But what they are asking, and I agree, they've asked to stop the killing. So in effect, we have a cease, maybe not a total cessation of hostilities. Maybe now Israel can have, very targeted counterterrorism operations, but they cannot continue with the attacks on Gaza as we have seen over the last 100 or more days. So what the court has asked for: stop the killing, stop injuring, and so effectively is a ceasefire from the point of view of the majority of the civilians inside Gaza. Whether Israel follow the court's order is another question, of course.
So that's a thing, isn't it? So perhaps explain for us, if you would, what the legal ramifications of this are, because it's legally binding, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a legally binding order. So states and any states involved must follow it if they want to uphold an international rule of law. If they don't want to hold up an international rule of law, then that leads us into a very dark place. So I think many states will be doing everything they can to uphold this order. The court, of course, doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms, but it is the judicial body of the United Nations, and we have the United Nations Security Council, which would be in a position to enforce this order. So that will put a lot of pressure on the US, the UK, and others not to exercise their veto if a resolution is put before them. Should they exercise their veto, then it will go to the General Assembly, and then it will go to domestic courts. And this will have wide-ranging implications. We are now under notice, the whole world is under notice, that there's a serious risk of genocide in Gaza. And so all states now have to step up and do a due diligence on what their capacity is to prevent this genocide. And as citizens, we can get involved too. We can pressurize our own governments. We can pressurize local authorities who might be considering planning permission for Israeli weapons companies. And any Israeli government official that wants to travel to any state in the world now would be at risk of arrest. because an arrest warrant could be issued if they don't follow these orders. So it will have wide-ranging implications, even if Israel decide to ignore it.
Thomas, appreciate that. You put it all in a good perspective for us. Thanks very much indeed. Thomas McManus, Director of the International State Crime Initiative at Queen Mary University. Let's get a view now from Tel Aviv in Israel. We can speak to Akiva Elder, who's a political analyst. So, Akiva, just give us the view from Israel and how this will be received.
Well, it was already received by Prime Minister Netanyahu, actually, as good news, because they were very worried, the government, that the court will decide that it's time for Israel to agree to a ceasefire and to leave Gaza, get back home, and at the same time, it would not offer anything to the hostages. Now, the good news is that the judges took it very seriously, the Israeli arguments that the war started on October 7th with the vicious attack of Hamas and the killing of 1,200 Israeli civilians and soldiers. There were some people in Jerusalem that were hoping that the ICJ will reject in limine the appeal of South Africa, but it was not really in the cards. So the voices that I can hear from Jerusalem is that we cut the losses.
You mentioned that about the ceasefire, the fact that it wasn't actually stated, but then it does say amongst the provisional measures that Israel must take all measures to stop the killing of members of the group, i.e. Palestinians, or harming them, and stop imposing measures to jeopardize births. And as a South African minister that we had on a little while ago was saying, that effectively does mean a ceasefire, because if Israel doesn't abide by that, it's breaking the rule that they've laid down.
Well, the Israeli interpretation, Nick, is that Israel is already doing its utmost to not to target civilians, and Israel is allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza. Maybe it's not enough. But we know
that's not true, don't we?
Well, it's partially true. In the last few days, there were families of the Israeli captives who were blocking the passage. Israel is allowing Egypt to transfer goods and other material such as drugs into Gaza, but at the same time, Israel is presenting it as a trade-off, that the Hamas must give something in return. And elsewhere in Qatar, we see another kind of process. There is a legal process in The Hague, but at the same time, Israelis, Americans, Qatari, and Egyptians are trying to find a way out of this mess before Lebanon gets involved. So what happened, with all due respect to the judges, 15 judges who spend their time very seriously in Hague, the scene will be happening elsewhere. Now, I have also to add that this is not over. In few days, on February 19, the ICJ is going to meet again to discuss humanitarian and other issues in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, which is dealing with the entire occupation. And this is coming from the General Assembly of the UN, and it wasn't mentioned today, but the game is not over yet.
Right. And this ruling, so that's down the line, but this immediate ruling is now likely to put intense pressure, yet more pressure, on Israel's best friend, that is the United States, and US President Joe Biden in an election year with polls going against him. How do you think US will respond at the next UN Security Council meeting?
Well, the United States made it very clear that they see what's happening in Gaza as a humanitarian crisis, but not as genocide. I will not be surprised if you're going to hear in the next few hours about the Holocaust. Tomorrow, there will be the International Memorial Day of the Holocaust. And the fact that Israel is accused of genocide, the Jewish state, will help Netanyahu to portray Israel as the victim. And the Israeli public is having a very hard time understanding and accepting the fact that you can have more than one victim here. And there is no good news here or any news coming from The Hague to the people who are suffering. The Palestinian, 1.2 Palestinians who were uprooted from their homes, 150,000 Israelis from the south and the north who have been also evacuated from their homes, let alone the 130 captives that we know nothing about their whereabouts and if they're really alive. We hear so many terrible stories about sexual harassment, about torturing, and we don't know how many of them will be back on their feet or in plastic bags.
Okay, Akiva, we're going to leave it there. Appreciate your analysis from Tel Aviv. Akiva Elder speaking to us there. Let's get more analysis here in the studio. Our political analyst, Marwan Bashara. Marwan, what do you make of what you've just heard? We've also been hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister who says, not surprisingly, that the case is outrageous and that Israel will continue to do what is necessary to defend itself.
He was going to say that no matter what the ruling was, but he's also known to be, Mr. Netanyahu, that is, to be, Israel's #1 spinner. So he was going to spin this to his advantage any which way, right? And I think it's kind of sad, of course, that some people just don't learn the lessons. Under his tenure, or during his tenure, or because of him, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel today is on trial for genocide. These are the people who hail back from the people who went through the Holocaust. Because of Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition of criminals, Israel today is on trial by the world's court, the International Court of Justice, on genocide. That there is evidence been provided to the court, both material evidence about what is going on in Gaza, and in terms of intent, and in terms of the United Nations agencies, and this is, after all, a United Nations court, that basically describe in details the awful situation for the civilians in Palestine, in Gaza, and why Israel has been deliberately targeting civilians, and why the status quo the status quo cannot continue as we see today. And that's why I think it is so important that this be viewed for South Africa as a huge victory, even though it is not an immediate win for the people in Gaza. Because as we said, you and I have been talking about it for a while now, that no matter what the court would have come out with, Israel was not going to abide with it. Now, what we hope is that because now Israel is on trial for genocide, its backers will probably do some self-criticism.
Okay, which brings us on to the UN Security Council. And we've already seen the United States, 3 vetoes so far to not have a ceasefire. How are they likely to respond now? Because there's a lot of pressure, and it's just ramping up on Biden, isn't it, in this election year?
Absolutely. I hope we start with the Europeans and on to the Americans. My sense is that the Europeans are going to be under even more pressure for the time being.
Specifically UK and Germany.
Exactly. And the UK and Germany, if you heard Rishi Sunak just the last couple of days, he's suddenly speaking about an immediate sustainable ceasefire. An immediate but sustainable, right?
Cameron
he mixed up the two words.
Yeah.
Look, Biden, it depends whether Biden is going to go the expedient way or the principled way. I mean, the guy is 80 years old. If I were him, I would be writing my will now and go the big way on principle and morality rather than on expediency and short-sightedness. He shouldn't be looking now for political future. He should be looking for a place in history. His place in history now, for a man who said that we're going to end the forever wars and we're going to put human rights at the center of our foreign policy, that man should be really now considering what does it mean for his main ally that he financed, that he armed, that he protected, that this ally today is on trial for genocide. What does that really mean? Now, the court judges who are not strategists, they're not military strategists, right? The court judges said, apparently in an indirect way, that Israel can fight Hamas without carrying genocide. I mean, we can interpret it that way, that Israel can continue to fight Hamas without carrying genocide, and hence it has to take these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 measures voted by a majority of 15 to 2, 16 to 1, 16 to 1, and 15 to 2. That's a huge majority, suspecting that Israel could be carrying acts of genocide and demanding that it does not do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right?
Right.
This is important for the United States to be listening to. And as you know, as you and I have been speaking earlier, it is imperative for the UN Security Council now to be demanding for a ceasefire, because that's the safest way to making sure that those provisional orders are carried out.
So is that the next thing that's going to happen in New York at UNHQ?
You would expect that
call for a ceasefire.
Because any which way, even though this is binding, this rule, and there is no way to to pursue it any further, this is binding. To be executed, it has to go to that executive authority of the world body, the UN Security Council. At the UN Security Council, depending on under which chapter these things are taken, but if there is no veto on the part of the United States, that would send a more applicable, more actionable step on the part of the international community to force Israel to act or to stop fighting. But now we have 3 things happening at the same time, Nick. Yeah. One, we have Israel on genocide, on trial for genocide. We have the public opinion turning against Israel. And we have a situation in Gaza and in Israel that's not going well to the advantage neither of the Palestinians or for the Israelis. So pressures are building up in all directions now.
Interesting. Marwan, thanks for that for the time being. Marwan Bashara. Now, we are continuing our coverage